Okay, this video is for you if you care about the free exchange of ideas. And it's not targeted to you if you believe in creationism or you believe in naturalistic evolution. I mean, I'm not really trying to settle that question. I'm going to talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it from a different point of view, and that is what the creation versus evolution conflict teaches us about ourselves and about our culture. I'm going to start with a joke. A creationist, an evolutionist, and God walk into a bar. Which one of the three was there when the universe started? Okay, maybe it's not a joke, but there's a point to the question, and maybe you can pick up on what that point is. Creationism versus evolution is characterized as this conflict between Bible thumpers and scientists. On one hand, we have those who believe that the earth is 6,000 years old and began with God creating Adam and Eve and all the different types of plants and animals. And on the other hand, you have those who believe that the universe is 14 billion years old, and the Earth, of course, is several billion years old, and that all matter, energy, life, humanity came about through naturalistic processes, and God was not involved at all. And of course, this really simplifies and oversimplifies the conflict, because the conflict is really a kaleidoscope of different ideas encompassing science, philosophy, theology, and many different models have been put forth to try to make sense of all of these things. We've got the young Earth creationists who think that the Earth is 6 to 10,000 years old. The universe was created with apparent age. We've got people who hold to the gap theory. God created the universe in the distant past, I don't know, maybe 14 billion years ago. And then some disaster happened between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, a gap. And then we start with Genesis 1:2, where over the next 6 days, God terraforms the earth. We see creation from the perspective of somebody standing on the surface of the earth. And then we have the day-age theory, which says, okay, there's 6 days of creation, but they weren't literal days. They were ages of, an uncertain amount of time. And then you have some people who try to take the theory of relativity and say that the Earth is simultaneously thousands and billions of years old, depending on your frame of reference. And of course, then there are theistic evolutionists who believe that evolution was the way that God created all life on Earth. And then you have naturalistic evolutionists who say that God was not involved. And so which one is true? I don't know. I really don't know. Like 2 of the 3 characters in the bar, I wasn't there when the universe began, and so I don't know. And are any of them true? I don't know. Maybe there's a different explanation that really accounts for reality, an explanation that we haven't come up with. And so don't misunderstand me. I believe in God. I believe in the Bible. I believe that the Genesis account is 100% reliable, but I'm not 100% sure exactly how it should be understood. And the purpose of this video is not to settle that question. Instead, I want to talk about what this conversation says about us as human beings and what it says about our culture. And so let me ask you a question. Are you familiar with the concept of positioning? Positioning is a marketing term. It means to control how other people think about you, your ideas, your products, your business. And positioning is what allows one person to charge $50,000 for a coaching session, while another person gives the exact same advice and has difficulty charging $5 for it. Elections are all about positioning. Political parties and candidates work very hard to position themselves in your mind as capable, caring, competent, and so on, while trying to position their opponents as dangerous and or bumbling idiots. The naturalistic evolution folks have done an incredible job with positioning. They've managed to position themselves and naturalistic evolution as science, and therefore factual, reliable, true. And they've managed to position creationism as a religion, and therefore a myth, a fantasy, a feel-good story that has nothing to do with reality. And this is why evolution is taught in public schools and creationism is not, because one is, quote, science and the other is, quote, religion. And the idea is that you can hold to this schizophrenic worldview that evolution is true on a scientific level and creation is true on a religious level. Yeah. A while back, I looked up creationism on Wikipedia, and the first line, at least at that time, articles changed, but at least at that time, was creationism is a pseudoscience. In other words, it's a false science. It's a myth. It's a fairy tale. It's what intellectually inferior people believe. So stop and think about that. Pseudoscience. What is that? It's name-calling. It's not an argument. It's not a proof. It's not a carefully thought-out premise with evidence behind it. It's just name-calling. And name-calling is not science. It's positioning. I mean, you may or may not be aware of this. There are scientists who are young Earth creationists, and there are scientists who are old Earth creationists. And yes, they've looked at the science, and yes, they have scientific reasons for believing what they believe. There are scientific arguments for creationism, but those arguments are systematically withheld from you. They're not allowed to be taught in public schools because, remember, evolution is science, creation is religion, and public schools don't want to teach religion. So why are these arguments, these ideas, why is this science for creationism not allowed at the table? What's the real reason behind it? Well, the reason is because those who control the narrative don't want it there. They don't want that science there. And why don't they want it there? Well, let me suggest two reasons. Number one, the most frightening thing for an unbeliever is to imagine that at the end of his or her life, they will have to stand before God and answer for how they lived their life, a God who has the power to say yes or no to heaven or hell. And so, that is frightening. And it may be unconscious, but I think the number one priority for unbelievers is to remove this God from their lives. And naturalistic evolution is a tool that does that. It says, hey, look, we have an explanation for things that doesn't involve God, so God can get lost. We don't need God. So that's number one. But number two, their power and influence rides on their narrative. If their narrative fails, their power and influence dies. And as humans, above almost anything else, we love to cling to power. And this is a point that you need to understand. Controlling the narrative controls the positioning. It keeps people in power who want to stay in power. And this isn't just true about creation and evolution. It applies everywhere. We're supposed to live in a nation with a First Amendment right to freedom of speech, but we don't have freedom of speech. Certain ideas are restricted, not allowed, prohibited by those who hold power and influence. Let me give you an example. A close relative of mine suffered a stroke. His doctor hinted that a certain much-touted medical procedure might be responsible for that stroke. And why can't I tell you what that medical procedure was? Because I don't have freedom of speech, and neither do you. In our culture, we talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you may have your own thoughts about that, but let me say this. Here's where we don't have DEI, in the world of ideas. Certain ideas are dismissed, they're marginalized, they're ridiculed, and they're banned. Why are they banned? Is it because they're wrong? No, not necessarily. Instead, they don't match the narrative that those in power want to preserve. So, I'm trying to wake you up here. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? Controlling how people think is the essence of totalitarianism. It leads to, and it already has led to, the criminalization of political dissent. It will destroy our nation if we don't find the courage to stop it. Minority ideas must have a place at the table. They must be openly discussed so we all can look at them and decide if they have any merit. And we all need to teach ourselves to think so that we aren't conned by the next marketer who comes along who happens to be good at positioning. So anyway, how has the church responded to all of this? I've seen two responses, and I'm not too excited about either one. First, some Christians become combative. They know that they know that they know that the earth was created in 4004 BC, and their approach is, it's my way or the highway. Well, I don't know, but in my view, that's arrogance. It's arrogance just like those who claim that God had nothing to do with creation is arrogance. We are, after all, human beings, and human beings don't know very much. We weren't there. We don't know. We didn't see it. And second, and in some ways more disturbing, is the church has retreated. It's surrendered. Today's church is focused almost entirely on seekers and spiritual infants. And the thinking is, let's just get them to Christ. Let's get their ticket to heaven settled. We can deal with these other issues later. But later never comes. So yeah, I don't think creationism versus evolution is really about religion versus science. It's about arrogance. It's about control. It's about positioning. It's about marketing. It's about fear. And it's about clinging to a narrative that we desperately hope is right. So my hope is that collectively we can find a way to find the courage to bring all ideas to the table so that we can look at them and decide together if they have any merit. And if they don't, then, each person can say, that's not for me. But suppressing views that we don't like is a mistake, and it's a mistake that leads us to a very bad place. I'm Dwight Clow. Hope this is helpful. Much love from my home to yours. Have a fantastic week.